Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and we have a special program today on self-mastery skills and global decision making. This is one of those topics that continues to get more and more important because the world becomes more complex. We have global teams across different cultures. There's a variety of complexities that are making it more difficult. However, more companies have global reach and have global teams. And so the reality is that, and the reality is the fact that it's even more complicated than it ever was. And so how do we sort through all of that to make better decisions and to run businesses more successful? And so fortunately, we have the answer. And so today, our keynote speaker is Dr. Delbar Niroushak. She is going to be speaking about this topic. She's got a presentation. She'll have time for Q&A at the end. We also have Jenna Fuentes in the audience, who is also someone who is very familiar with these topics. And I'm sure, Jenna, you'll have some comments as well. However, our keynote today is Dr. Delbar Niroushak. I hope you will listen. I hope you will participate, and I'm sure you will enjoy. Delbar, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. I turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, everyone, being here. And let's start. So I'm going to share my screen. And so how's everyone? I assume
I'm okay.
Everybody's good. That's good. That's good to know. At least someone is okay. Because it's going to be about self-mastery. So it's all about you understanding when and how you're better, or you can be even good, even today. So let's start. Self-mastery skills in global decision-making. So I just start a brief understanding and, introduction of myself. Some of you are familiar with me, some of you maybe not. So my name is Delbar. I have my PhD in psychology, and I'm also a qualified human resource consultant from London. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate every time I go back there. I'm also a co-founder of the Semantics, the holistic and science-based organizational development solution for companies. And I also have a coaching institute called Coaching for Change Enterprise based in Vancouver, Canada. And what I will be talking about today, it's a part of my 20 years experience designing behavior indicators to measure change and success. Because I believe that every time you want to talk about change, it usually starts, and it should start from us as an individual, either being a leader, being any staff, anyone who is going to create impact needs to understand first how they are in their everyday life in order to know how they can measure their performance, and also as a team member. And one of the things that I'm very much keen on, it's on something that I have recently created and designed called the SAME System of Empowerment and Accountability Management, which it's a process, it's a model that navigates the right problem in organizations, companies, for them to target the root cause even faster and be able to understand what skills their individual teams need to have in order to leverage the skills needed to ensure the ROI, so the company can also measure change and success. But today we're going to emphasize on the individual to begin with. So, of course, these are some of the clients that I used to work, and some of them I'm still working. And I really appreciate working with public sector. I don't know how many of you have had that experience, but very interestingly, on development, even though sometimes we believe that, or sometimes we assume that development is only for private sector. Self-mastery skills. So what are your thoughts? Let's begin with the question. What is self-mastery? How do you experience it? Anyone? Should I call names?
Well, feel free to unmute yourself and just make an interactive conversation.
Yes.
Hey, Chris, good to see you. And hi, Ruby. Thank you for joining as well. Any thoughts to that question, Jenna?
Okay, well, I'll start, and then maybe I can pass the ball to somebody. This is just me brainstorming out loud, but I imagine it has to. This is me processing out loud. That one, like knowing yourself, so like identity and knowing your values, purpose, mission, meaning. Because then once you know yourself, in order to master, I think it's about confidence and tracking and like discipline, like any goal, because and also desires and wants. But I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jenna. Yes, you said it done. You said everything about self-mastery. That's amazing. And why do we have to need to engage more with our self-mastery skills internally? Why is it necessary? You know, sometimes people even name it self-management. So why do you think it's necessary, especially regarding to decision-making or any acts in general?
I think it's because we have, like positive intelligence teaches, that there are saboteurs that we have, that kind of built in kind of bad stuff, you know, in our heads that makes us, for instance, want to react in certain ways because of the way we've been trained, the lizard brain or whatever. And so the more we act at a sage level, that's really when the mastery takes over, right? And we push or ignore or find a way to just get those kind of bad thoughts. Bad's probably not the right word, right? But things that probably are less productive in the moment aside, and do better things. And sometimes the better thing is to do nothing, right? So mastery just means control of the good stuff, and being able to push the other things aside. How does that fit?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Doug. Exactly. Because every decision we want to make, it's all about our assumption of what's happening around us. And based on our understanding, we're articulating what is reality. And based on that reality, we go forward, take a step. And it's important, what are we creating in our head that it might make sense to us, but not necessarily to others. So at the end of the day, our communication skills or even our interpersonal skills will be affected by our self-mastery. That is why these days it's very necessary and crucial, and one of the key enablers or key factors to any success whatsoever. And sometimes even business people, it's very not challenging, but for them to acknowledge that they have impact in their own business, not necessarily the external factors, it's unbearable. And sometimes even difficult to understand that, hey, no, that's not true. It's a processing, but who created that processing? You. So it's depending on how you're thinking, the thought processing, emotions, everything needs to be aligned in order for us to make a decision. Now, what is self-mastery in words? It's definitely, as Doug and dear Jenna mentioned, that it's individuals acknowledging first their growth areas, what they need to do differently, what is necessary for them to do differently, their thought processing, the emotions, everything. And of course, to be conscious about whatever that is happening internally and the impact of any external factors. And at the end of the day, to be able to make a purposeful decision. It's all about being mindful and aware. So for that reason, now I have designed, actually, this is a part of my accountability model, which I was talking about, but it's one of the enablers and one of the key enablers to begin with in order to learn how to hold ourselves accountable, how to hold our team accountable, and of course, our organizational accountable. So every enabler, which now it's self-mastery, they come with 5 specific behavior indicators. So we want to score from 1 to 10 that how much of this do we have? So please engage either live or even through chat. Emotional management, how much of that you have from 1 to 10? And what does that mean? Being aware of your emotions, good or bad, it's not good or bad, it's us experiencing any emotion on a specific situation. Sometimes it tends to bring up good feelings, but sometimes that exact emotion, if it's experienced in other situations, we call it bad. But are you aware of those emotions in general? And are you aware of how much of it you have been managing? Just 1 to 10. Second one is managing limiting beliefs. That's the core of self-mastery. It's like, I be able to manage the limiting beliefs. And sometimes we call it even negative beliefs. So what about that? Oh, sorry. I was just checking the chat box. 1 to 10, self-awareness. Are you aware of the parts that Jenna was talking about? Needs, wants, desires, self-esteem, self-confidence. Can you say the difference? Being mindful. What about that? It's like for you to be here and now. What are the times that it's very difficult for you to focus? Because imagine if there's those times that it's very difficult and challenging for you to focus, those are the times that maybe and might be necessary for you to take a step forward, to make a decision. So how would you be able to make a decision while not being focused? Is that even possible? And how challenging would that be for you? Because then you're forcing yourself that, hey, I need to do something, that I don't have enough time. But if you are not ready to take that one step, how the result is going to turn out. And of course, and last but not least, bias-free behavior. What are your thoughts on bias-free behavior? Like, do you have any example that would resonate with bias-free? What are your thoughts on this? There was other day that I was talking to another global chamber member, and I said that one of the things that I do in my webinars, trainings, either it's going to be a half an hour, 1 hour, or like full day workshop. I ask a lot of questions for people to engage, for them to understand how this topic can enable them in life in general. So that's the same thing I'm doing. And I tend to ask a lot of questions because your engagement matters. It's a part of learning. So any thoughts on bias-free behavior? It's where, yes, Jenna, you wanted to share something.
Sure, and I mean, open to what everybody else thinks. I really enjoy conversation and learning from everybody too. Again, this is me just always processing out loud with everybody that when I think about bias-free, I think one, there's like, you know, the whole DEI topic of bias. Also, I think there's over like 30 different biases. There's like confirmation bias, etc. So I think it's hard. Well, let me rephrase that. It's helpful to get out and expand our perspective. And I think that's what Global Chamber is about. And there's also different cultures, there's different values. So we're always kind of coming from a limited perspective, but when people shine light on it, it's looking at things in different ways. So I just, if it makes an example with the DEI, like diversity layers, I'm going to have my own bias based off of my lived experiences. But if you have bias-free, it makes me think of like the Constitution, or it makes me think of a company's purpose or values, that we have an objective criteria to compare to, where we have an audit that we're holding ourselves accountable to, that we agreed on. So trying to be objective, but anyway, that's me throwing that out there too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Anna. That is true. Actually, a part of it refers to DEI, the diversity, inclusion, equity, that everyone is trying to implement as a value. And it will get very challenging because, again, at the end of the day, this is something that I really talk about with the CEOs, the decision makers, and in general stakeholders, that it's not for you to respect someone because they're different. It's for you to understand why you are respecting that person, which is different than you. It's understanding the mind, the concept of the difference, and again, be bias-free to that concept. That is, to be honest, very challenging for so many of us. Why that is challenging? Because of the limiting beliefs, because of, based on our previous experiences, that we thought, okay, these people are good if they are doing this and that. We have a definition of good and bad. We have definition for everything in our head based on our previous experiences. And as a psychologist, you know, doing this 24/7, and I would say always it's my backbone, even though I do less therapy these days. And I'm very much focused on personal development, organizational development, you know, as a leadership and business development coach. But again, at the end of the day, I can hear limiting beliefs, and it's a part of personal development processing. And for individuals to acknowledge that it's okay to have and to understand where is it coming from, you know, to navigate the root cause, and of course, to come up with solutions, that's where you get to self-mastery. That is the purpose of self-mastery. And thank you for sharing that, Jenna. It's my understanding against yours. It's one's understanding against someone else's. We truly believe that exists. And sometimes we have facts and figures to prove that. But when we're delivering the message, it's not tangible for the other person, and they perceive us as a biased person that, why are you forcing me to go along with something that I don't believe it exists? That's again where the communication comes to the picture. But I need to be aware of as an individual, especially while making decisions. And I'm going to go shortly to what is decision-making and what is global decision-making. That makes it a bit, you know, not complicated, but it needs more effort to make that global decision, any decision whatsoever. And self-mastery comes to the picture as one of the key results, that I need to get there in order to make a good decision that is also impactful. Now, of course, with that being said, we have limiting beliefs. You know, that's the core piece of self-mastery. So honestly, how many of us do experience that in a daily routine? And that is very common. Why that is common? Because we're human beings, because we have emotions, because we have past experiences. And sometimes I always think of coaching, the purpose of coaching was to enable individuals to understand what are their biases based on, you know, overcoming limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs are all the opinions, the beliefs that we believe it's absolutely true. And we have facts to prove that. And based on those beliefs, sometimes we not just stop us, but it will also stop people to work and collaborate with us. It's like a barrier. It's like a big wall. So what are your internal walls? I call it as limiting beliefs. Some examples of those, usually they come with fear. And why fear? Because it will trigger the unhealthy emotion to prove that that belief, it's true, it's not even limiting. And they will keep, you know, digging and trying to track more proof to say, I can't do it because in previous experience, I proved that I'm not capable of doing it. So maybe I'm not just capable of doing it. Okay, let's do something else. But what happened is that you need to first understand, these are the 3 steps that I usually take every time I want to talk about limiting beliefs and managing limiting beliefs. That the first step is for us to understand where this emotion or this mindset is coming from. What are the facts that can prove that, for example, it's not possible, I can't make it? The next question is that, how would you prove this statement that it's wrong? If you even would be able to find one experience, even once, through all the years of experiences that you had, that it's going to prove this wrong, trust me, this statement is wrong. That's where you can understand the depth of understanding your thought processing before making a decision. And overall, why everything that I shared is important. Because your self-talk becomes your guidance. It's like you telling yourself, do this, make a decision like this, behave like this, interact like this, or even fear like this, withdraw like this. It's all about you either self-empowering or self-defeating. But it will happen so fast that you're not even aware of it, but you end up in the situation making a decision, and you believe, and you still believe that it's mindful with mindfulness and you were all aware of it, but it happens so fast and automatically that you end up doing something. And after a while, you would probably wonder, what was that thing that I said? Why did I do that? What was back then? What was I thinking? What was the purpose? What was the meaning? What was the reason? And you start digging and investigating, which that investigation is going to be timely and also costly. For that reason, we need to, based on my 20 years experience, and again, based on all the projects and research that I did, especially when it comes to decision-making, we need to know what is our level of self-mastery in order to know what is our next step, to do things differently because of the results that we want to achieve, that we're hoping to achieve because we deserve to achieve. Now, why I put self-mastery in decision-making? Any thoughts on that? You know, like you have decision-making, and we all know what is decision-making. Decision-making is a process of making choices, identifying specific, you know, core values or decisions or tasks, whatever you want to do or make happen. Probably the first step is gathering information, assessing alternative solutions based on those internal and external resources. Then you make a decision, right? This is a common understanding of what is decision-making. And imagine if the process of internal piece is missing, the huge, big missing puzzle, how would you be able to make a decision that is impactful? Now, if those parts which are going to be involving with internal resources are going to be with limiting beliefs, with bias-free, not even be able to be mindful, aware of it. So at least it sounds like, based on the definition, 50% of the times you're not able to make the right decision. You might be able to make a decision, but the purpose and the goal is to make the right decision based on what you desire to achieve. And with global decision-making, it will make it more challenging because you need to acknowledge and also identify what are the interferes, what are the different rules globally, that even those might be a part of the limiting, you know, obstacles for you, or even sometimes stopping. And on top of that, you have those self-mastery. If you don't have this, you won't be able to manage this. So you do something that you used to do every single time. So it will become a habit. And if you're not doing it consciously, it's your habit making a decision, and sometimes it might be wrong. So for that reason, it's very necessary to be able to have that opportunity to know, okay, what are the steps for me to acknowledge my differences, even personality-wise, while making a decision, in order to empower myself, to hold myself accountable, so I can be more impactful. What are your thoughts? Anyone?
Hi, so my thoughts are, it's somewhat confusing at times because
Good.
There's various roles in which we operate. So from a business perspective, I have a perspective. From a religious perspective, I have maybe religious doctrine that conflicts with what everyone else believes. I just think that there's so many different facets to people and the various things that we call facts. I think you said something about the facts in which we bring to the table, but you know, I would say that some things in which people believe are not factually sound. And so we have to develop some form of tolerance to, now at least, back in the day, we didn't have to have a tolerance for receiving someone's facts that weren't facts. But today I find that we even base decision-making, say the gender issue, you know, we have a number of different genders according to what man says, but then if I go back to my faith, there's only two genders, and I'm comfortable with my view, but maybe others are not comfortable because they bought into this new world perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Christopher. How does that feel for you? Because I can also hear that, okay, if I'm going to go with facts, and again, if it's going to part of it be faith, for example, the last sentence is going to be only two, but we have so many different genders. So what does that mean? Thank you so much for articulating that, because this is some of the challenges internally people have, but they don't talk about it, but still it's there. It still is there, hanging there. So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are exactly what I said, but my feeling, I think
Yes.
really the question you asked is,
Yes.
sometimes it's very confusing to articulate the feeling, because your feeling may be insensitive to others. And so you have to make a decision whether to hold your peace, not say anything, and keep your own values in place, or be somewhat combative and address the difference between what you believe and what I believe. I think that that's also the case with race in America, and for me at least. I served in the military, and at times I wasn't treated with the same respect as, say, white officers were treated as. And so there was an internal struggle that I had, because, sometimes the treatment that you're receiving is wrong. Others see it's wrong, but they condone the wrong behavior. And so it's very confusing. What do you do? Because once you speak up, your career may be over. And it's those types of things that, but I've, like many, I think, people or executives, we mask it. We talk internally amongst our own, but broadly, it's not a conversation that we have, because most people don't do well with race conversations.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing up this topic, because it's a very common topic and we see it very much globally, and it's happening, but nobody's talking about it. And to be honest, this is also impacting the result of the business, because how you think and how you perceive, this is how the expectation will deliver. This is how I will structure my expectation, that, okay, so from now on, I have this much of expectation from you, but this much bigger or even smaller, less or more expectation. So you're also limiting your people at the end of the day. You're not just limiting yourself, you're limiting your people, exactly how you experience in the military, because everyone is talented, no matter what race or color, no matter what race. And this is psychology, and this is knowledge. It's not just DEI. There are facts and knowledgeable researches and science-based that every individual is talented, as long as they know. It's like this part, to be aware and also mindful. And I really love the second piece that you added, when you speak up. When is the right time to speak up? Because if you speak up, it might create some damage or consequences, or it might, not a good result. So the question is not to stop speaking about it. The question is how to speak about it so it will be meaningful also to the other person, for them to learn to respect. Because everything is a process of learning. Nobody, like from childhood, nobody knows everything. Like even we still, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing progress, actually. But thank you so much for pointing that, because that is a very important value where the self-mastery brings and creates in businesses, that, okay, you see different people starting with race or gender or any criteria whatsoever. The first question is that, what is it you're requiring from that individual that needs to be delivered? And how the race, the color, or whatever, it's going to impact that delivery. If it's not impacting, then you're wasting your time and energy focusing on that criteria, because at the end of the day, that individual is going to deliver best results. And this is a process that every time I talk about it, and I link it to decision making, because that's where you decide to do something or not to do something. Thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Doug, you want to say something?
Well, Christopher's just sparked a lot of different thoughts in my head around the basic topic of decision making and leadership. And the one key thing was when he mentioned, you have inputs that are conflicting with your own value system, and the question becomes, do I say something, and what would I say, and then will that information change the way I make decisions? And it should, I think, right, depending on our own value system, alter. Like if someone is unethical, there should be some clarifying process to determine whether they are unethical. And I would find it difficult to work with someone who is unethical, but I also recognize that people move ahead, even though it might be in their best interest, it seems at the moment, to do a deal with someone who's unethical, maybe even racist or anti-Semitic. Last night I found out that Henry Ford was anti-Semitic, with the Ford Motor Company, which kind of blows my mind that I didn't know that before, to the extent that he was, and which goes to how things kind of perpetuate. And my own value system is to say something. And so when Christopher was talking, I wanted to ask him, how do you make those judgments of whether to say something or not? And are there cases where you've said something where something seems to be flagrant, and you probably do some checkpoint, like make sure you understand, or you confirm your understanding? And then how do you go about making a successful transition into standing up for a value that you hold dear, where you've really now gotten to the point where you need to address it rather than ignore it?
I could give you an example of one thing that I experienced when I was a young officer. I was in squadron officer school in Alabama, and Alabama, of course, had a lot of racial issues and problems. But when I was there as a young captain, we had an international group of officers that participated with the U.S. officers. So we invited other countries to come, and they would learn at squadron officer school the same lessons that I would learn. And so we had one leadership module that was effective followership. And they showed us videos, and they had a curriculum. And at that time, I was probably, out of 15 officers in my class, I was probably in the top, 5 competitively, because we all have to compete for distinguished graduates and other awards that set us apart. And so effective followership, they used the movie Glory. And Glory was a Civil War movie that Denzel Washington was in. And if you did see it, you recall there was a scene where Denzel, or the character he portrayed, was whipped because he didn't follow an order, and he was whipped again. And then after he was whipped, then these soldiers marched off, following the leader of the white officer's command, and Denzel was looked at as being the character that was made the example of. Well, the Air Force used this as their example of effective followership. So while I'm sitting there, and there are not very many of us Black officers, I felt very alienated, and I felt disrespected. And my flight commander was an African American officer, and I just made the call that on that day I was going to say something. But before I did, to answer your question of how did I validate my feelings, I went to a couple of the white officers in my class who I thought were fair, and I said, "What did you think of the example?" And they told me that they didn't think that it was a good example. And I said, "I feel hurt." And they said, "Well, we stand with you." So I protested with the commandant of the squadron officer school, the fact that they would even release and let this film be used as the example of followership, and got signatures of the other officers there to say remove the film. And so after I did so, the leadership at Squadron Officer School met with me. They agreed to remove it. But when I got back to my flight, talked to my flight commander, he says, well, you know, you just ruined your chance at getting distinguished graduate. I said, yeah, I know. And so that night, as opposed to buckling down and being into the coursework, studying and so forth, I went out and had a good time. And I saw my flight commander, and he says, what are you doing? I says, well, you told me it was over. And he says, yeah. He says, you're right, I did. He says, but I'm still going to make sure that you get recognized. And so I got Best Briefing Award. And it still gave me a little bit of an edge coming out of graduation. But it did show me that sometimes you do have to sacrifice in order to right the wrong. And in fact, we had so many nations from around the world that were a part of Squadron Officer School that when they saw the protests and they saw the change, I think that spoke volumes to how they saw America and the ability for us to make change. Even though I suffered, it was a victory because we all won. So that's my example.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Christopher. You actually articulated all the tracking indicators and criteria when you see, as a person who has self-mastery in companies, you know, understanding the impact of your decision because you had a reason. It's not, you didn't do it because of a fear. You know, I did not hear fear. I did not hear confusion or, you know, ambiguity, uncertainty. I felt you are very much aligned and tuned with your values, and you were definitely sure of what you're doing. It was meaningful to you. So that's why the impact was even measurable, which they awarded that. And number two, better and more effective communicator, because then you have the power to talk about it. And I just want to add on something, not to prove something, but to do something that will serve everyone, not just me. With what you did, you were actually helping and supporting others in order for them to leverage the skill and the knowledge that, hey, you can also think differently. With you thinking like that, you're not just limiting me, you're limiting yourself in your team. Because if I do less, then the overall impact or the overall performance of you as a leader will be downgraded. So you're not doing yourself any good. And of course, increasing the ability to influence and motivate people, because deep inside you feel so empowered, you're purposeful. And less bias means you have more options. Of course, the person was saying, are you aware that you're not going to get there, like Christopher? And you said, yeah, well, but then I assume you had different options in your mind. If sometimes, or even back then, you were not even aware or mindful. When you have less bias, actually, you have more alternative options to choose. It's not black and white. It's something that it's in between. It's not right or wrong, like 1 or 0 to 100 or 99 numbers in between. So you have options to choose. And of course, based on the options, you can create more results and more achievements. And the last two tracking points that you can see in companies is aligning individuals' goals with corporate goals, exactly how you articulated, Christopher. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Deep inside, your value was saying, hey, this is not right. Okay, now I'm a part of a team. I'm going to graduate. I want to, you know, deliver a message. I want to be an ambassador of that, you know, the global thing based on what you were going to do. That was the value step even. So is that aligned? No. It's a conflict of interest? No. What is it then? So with that self-mastery, you can create alignment, which unfortunately these days in companies, people not being aligned, they're not just damaging their reputation, their image, but also they're damaging the key results of a company without even noticing it. They're not even knowing, they're not even doing it willingly. It's not a purpose of hurting the company or hurting their team, but they're doing it unconsciously. And of course, at the end of the day, what most important thing is your happiness and your overall well-being. Because if you're not happy with what you're doing, you don't gain. The company might gain, but at the end of the day, if you don't gain, the company eventually would lose, because you're not feeling good. If your well-being might be a potential obstacle as a threat to your performance, then again, it's the loss of the company. It's like a loop. and for individuals to understand and acknowledge, even team leaders, line managers. I always have this conversation sometimes with stakeholders that, okay, let's score. Where are you? How can you track it in companies? Because the companies want to ensure ROI. It's not just feeling good, love is in there. Okay, that is good. But on top of that, where can I measure it, or where can I track it in order for me to understand really self-mastery matters? So based on what Christopher kindly shared, and of course, thank you so much, Doc, for putting more insight and to understand what's the underneath belief system or the value that is driving individuals, any individual, to make a decision. Honestly, it's all you. Sometimes you are against yourself without even noticing it. Sometimes you're promoting yourself without even noticing it. And this happening, either this or that, and of course, other happenings within internally, it's going to impact external factors. It's going to impact your decisions in your company, in life in general, but in businesses and in corporates, we call this personal development. And something that we track, it's called IDP planning, individual development planning. So each individual knows in any position, either as a team leader, project manager, CEO, VP, any position whatsoever, they would know that what is it they need to do differently, or even keep doing it, because it seems that it's helping the company, the overall growth margin. So they even will become more purposeful because they have a reason to do something or even stop doing it. Thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you. That was very insightful. I really appreciate your transparency. Thank you.
Delbar, the reverse of that, or the inverse of that, are all of the times that Christopher did not act, right? So that's a perfect example of assessing the situation, being the master of the situation, and having an impact that ultimately hurt him, but also helped him because he felt better about his value system and moving forward. But, how many times did he say nothing? In other cases, I'm guessing probably like many of us, it was, 10-1 or something like that, because it didn't seem at the time that it was worth to be a fight worth fighting, that he picked his battle. So how is that the way to look at it, and how best to be a master, to be able to pick your battles?
Thank you so much, Doc. That was a very deep question. And sometimes people wonder, is it going to be always a battle for me to win and someone else to lose? Is this a challenge that I need to overcome? Is it internally, externally? We have something called situational leadership. So it's important for in each situation, that's how you will become flexible. This is how you can become adaptable. For you to understand, if you're going to make a decision, what are the gains? What are the loss, actually? What is it you're going to gain in order to lose? Are you going to sacrifice something over something else? So what is that one thing that you're sacrificing, and how much that one thing means to you? It's worthwhile doing it. Because if it's not going to be aligned with that, you're not just damaging the overall concept of the decision. Honestly, you're damaging yourself, because when you're not fulfilled, how can you deliver fulfillment in your business or in your company? That's why I always say it's not the problem you're solving with self-mastery. It's for you to know the root cause of that, whatever problem, or even the goal. It doesn't necessarily have to be always like negative versus positive, any decision whatsoever. Like for Christopher, that day was an improvement, was a positive decision, was a reinforcement. But maybe for someone else, thinking it from a different perspective, the person would say, were you out of your mind? What if things would go wrong? What the hell were you thinking back then? But in his situation, in his shoes, he did the best decision for him. So for every individual, it's different. That's why when I teach and I talk about this in companies, they will learn to uplift their flexibility, and at the same time to have reasons when you're doing it, why you're doing it, what's the outcome you want to achieve. Now, as an individual, obviously we know that when we go to a to a work environment, it's not us against the company. Oh, I'm going to do this because it seems like it feels that it's not good. So what is it I'm going to do? Exactly how Christopher talked about it. Of course, he did that, even before taking the action. Probably he went and talked about his feelings. That, hey, what are your thoughts? I think, what was the impact of that person talking to me like that? And he was very transparent and honest about it, that he said, oh, I felt hurt. So we have that value vulnerability, and it's okay. As long as you can articulate it, at least you don't lie to yourself. At least you are not fake to yourself. Because if you are, then how can the company trust you if you cannot trust in your true, belief system or even the experience you're going through? So I know that was a very long answer to a question, Doc, but to make it even shorter, like 1, 2, 3, the first step is for us to articulate what is the decision we want to make and how is it going to be impactful. If I'm in an organizational, like work environment perspective or environment, it's going to impact the environment and also me within the environment. And if there's going to be any support I need to ask. If there's going to be any purpose that I need to articulate, emphasize, or even clarify, identify, I need to do in order to take the next step, which is going to be the decision. Otherwise, I'm doing something because I just want to do something and there is no purpose to it. Thank you.
Great thoughts. We only have about 5 minutes. One of the things that occurs to me from what you said was that goes to me to one of the real values of surrounding yourself with good people. Because if you have people that are somewhat random, invariably they have random thoughts that often may not be aligned with your own value system. And we can't, there's an old line with, what was the fellow's name from Saturday Night Live, Stuart Smalley. He says it's much easier, rather than to carpet the world, to wear slippers. We can't change everything all at once. And so surrounding ourselves with people that have these kinds of skills that you're talking about makes things easier for us and makes it less likely or fewer times that we have to step up like Christopher did. Otherwise, if it's a random sample of people just kind of in the world, it gets a little overwhelming.
It does. And one last thing before, I believe Christopher also wants to add something. Sometimes people ignore what they hear. They say, I don't care about what the person says. I'm going to do my job well. I don't care I don't care. Sometimes we do that internally. We say that to ourselves, but it needs to be authentic. If you really don't care, you need to show you really don't care. If it's important, if you have other important criteria or values, so you need to accept that. That's why I talk about mindfulness and awareness, that what are your values? What are your needs? How much of it's aligned? If it's not, you don't need to wait and then explode, obviously. When was the first time you thought the alignment is not happening? Because it's really impacting the behavior, which in organizational, framework, it's going to impact the performance. We're not, of course, we're going to be friends with, and we are friends, but at the end of the day, there are expectations and deliverables that we are promised to deliver. And if that doesn't happen, I'm not improving, or I'm not in service of not just the company, but also myself, because I need to, even be truthful to myself that how much of my work is impactful. And that's where that, as Doug mentioned, that we don't need to necessarily wait. If you are adaptable, flexible, if you're patient, so being patient is no stress. If you're experiencing stress while waiting, so you're not patient. You're just taking things, very seriously and not being able to adjust yourself. So I'm just very articulating based on behavior indicators. That is very important as well. Yes, Christopher, please.
I was just going to say that, for me, Global Chamber has been the example of where our CEO has used self-mastery to be able to guide the ship. I mean, every day, I'm sure that there's a different email from a different set of concerns globally, from different regions of the world, or whether it's things that have to do with the basics of race, ethnicity, gender. And I know that there's a purposeful, intentional, deliberate mastery that Doug exhibits, almost like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was the king of being self-mastery, if you ask me. But the Global Chamber has a very responsibility to help promote good, ethical, national trade across the world, and you have to have the right actors. And so he facilitates his team be good actors, and when they're not, then he does the right things as well. So I do think that we have a positive example in Global Chamber that this topic really fits well with what we do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that really resonates. Thank you. We just have a couple minutes, Delbar. So my recommendation is maybe final comments from Jenna, and then maybe you provide some final comments that would include what's the answer? What are some of the things that you then provide to be able to help leaders get to that next level? Does that work for you?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Please, Jenna.
Jenna, would you like to
yeah.
make any final comments? We really
Sure.
appreciate your involvement today and your thoughts.
No, I mean, thank you all. I'm really learning a lot. Again, thank you, Christopher, for being vulnerable. I think it's really interesting to hear like specific situations. It's also really inspiring. And also, I thank you, Doug, for your commentary. And I just put in the chat what I thought was really interesting, because that's why I wrote number 7, because I feel, I'll even just say from my personal standpoint, is I feel like a lot of us, like we give, but I'll even say sometimes I forget, where I'm like, oh yeah, but is this fulfilling, or why am I doing this? So that resonates with me, where I do believe that having that alignment of like taking a step back. So I'll just even say personally, like sometimes we're just running, we're just go. But if we take a step back and reassess with values, with purpose, mission, intention. So I just thought those were really interesting takeaways. And even what you said, Christopher, of like seeking feedback from other people to, check like, is this sound, or let's hear from multiple perspectives. I thought that was interesting. Like other people found that, and what you were saying, Doug, that perhaps other people noticed it, but they're afraid to say something. So anyway, I thought this was really, really enlightening.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much for everyone sharing and also listening and being there to hold this space for us to exchange knowledge and experience. Exactly what self-mastery does, it's actually a part of a bigger scope called accountability management model, which the first step is self-mastery, that I usually elaborate more in companies for leaders, for any individuals, but specifically for leaders, because they're in that position of making decisions that, and not sometimes, but always, it's timely, it's, needs to be done in timely manner, and sometimes it comes with some cost or even with some added value purpose. So the overall understanding is that if we want to take some few steps to begin with as a prerequisite to self-mastery skills, is at least to be aware of the emotion. That's one of the reasons I asked Christopher, so how do you feel? So how does that make you feel? Because feeling is that the drive and the motor behind your thought. And if you would be able to manage that, the thought processing and the concept of what's happening in your mind that you're designing in your head will be more manageable. And of course, at the end of the day, it will be bias-free behavior, what you're delivering that people would observe and perceive you as. And of course, the two elements are self-awareness and mindfulness. So I need to know what's happening. As Jenna was mentioning, well, I'm giving, but then sometimes I wonder what's happening. So why inside I feel like that conflict of interest that I did mention, I'm doing good, but I don't feel good about what I'm doing good to others. So does that mean I'm a bad person, that I'm not, enjoying what I'm doing, why I'm not enjoying my contribution to my company, what's wrong, what is that missing puzzle. So that's where the self-mastery again comes, because that is, to be honest, that is time consuming. And while your employees or even your leaders are thinking of what if, that what if can also be costly for your companies. And those small costs will bring bigger costs, like a disaster sometimes. And that's where every time I start with self-mastery, then I go to situational, and I call it smarter leadership, because these days we don't want smart leadership, is not good enough. We need to have smarter leadership. And then we get to the cohesive team, the coaching mindset, and of course, agility. Because these 5 enablers is like the whole pieces of puzzle that will enable the person in 3 levels to learn how to hold themselves accountable in an individual, personal level, in a team level, and an organizational level. What the overall goal is to be able to deliver best results, something that we all deserve, especially you business owners, decision makers, based on time and effort that you're putting. That's the least desire to ask for. That's the least expectation to ask for. And thank you so much, Doc. Thank you for the Global Chamber to give me this opportunity to share my knowledge and experience. This is how I walk through the leaders. So it's a part of it, the training, the assessment. We start with the assessment to begin with, and then find the root cause. And based on that, there are tailored trainings so they can go through with one-to-one coaching or either team coaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Delbar. That's the end of the program. And I think that what you just talked about of how you do the assessment, you look for the root cause and then find the solutions to be able to create the clarity and understanding, to be able to be more mindful on a day-to-day basis, and to be able to pick and choose the examples that Christopher so eloquently discussed of all of the work that was involved. Certainly not a spur of the moment decision on his part to make and have an impact that reverberates. You know, that old story of the butterfly in China created the tidal wave in North America. You know, I think we sometimes have seen that example, and certainly in each of our lives we see that example. And in our work, we know that sometimes maybe even the smallest thing that we do has a significant impact on someone else or on the business. And that's ultimately what we want to do more of. And Delbar helps us do that. So Delbar, thank you for taking
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
For sharing this today, and definitely reach out if you're not connected to Delbar in LinkedIn, please do. If you have any trouble connecting with her or anyone at Global Chamber, please send an email to info@globalchamber.org, and we'll make sure that you're connected. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and be mindful and make better decisions. Thank you, Delbar.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Christopher, Jenna, everyone. Thank you.